Hey guys, welcome to Asutosh Coaching Center. Now we are going to start on chapter Biodiversity and Conservation. Let's start. The chapter name is Biodiversity and Conservation. Okay, conservation. Let's start. As we know that if an alien from a distant galaxy were to visit our planets, okay, our Earth's, and the first thing that would amaze and baffle him would most probably be the enormous diversity of life that he would encounter. For even for humans, the rich variety of living organisms with which they shared this planet and never ceases to astonish and fascinate us. The common man would find it and hard to believe that are not more than 20,000 species of ants and 3 lakh species of beetles and 28,000 species of fishes and nearly 20,000 species of orchids. Ecologists and evolutionary biologists have been trying to understand and the significance of such diversity by asking important questions. Why are so many species? Okay, why there are so many species? This is the question what it will be getting in your mind. Okay, now let us check. Now, did such a great diversity exist throughout Earth's history? How did this class diversification come about? How and why is this diversity important to the biosphere? Would it function any differentially if the diversity was much less? How do humans benefit from the diversity of lives? Now 15.1 biodiversity. In our biosphere, immense diversity or heterogeneity exists not only at the species level but at the all level of biological organization and ranging from the macromolecules with cell to biomes. Biodiversity is a term popularized by the psychobiologist Edward Wilson to describe okay to describe the diversity of all level of biological organization. The most important of them are, now first is genetic diversity. What is genetic diversity? A single species might have show and high diversity at a genetic level over its distribution range. The genetic variation shown by the medicinal plant Rafflesia or Vomiteria growing in the different Himalaya ranges and might be in the term of potency and the concentration of the active chemical respirin, and that the plant produces. India has more than 50,000 genetically different strains of rice and 1,000 varieties of mango. Species diversity. The diversity at the species level, for example, Western Ghats have greater amphibian species and diversity than the Eastern Ghats. Third is ecological diversity. At the ecosystem level, India, for the instance, with its desert, range, forest, mangroves and coral reefs, wetlands, estuaries and alpine meadows, has a greater ecosystem diversity than the Scandinavian country like Norway. It has taken millions of years of evolution to accumulate this rich diversity in nature, but we could lose all that wealth in less than 2 centuries. If the present rate of species losses continues, biodiversity and its conservation and now vital environmental issue of the international concern, as more and more people around the world begin realize the critical importance of the biodiversity of our survival and well-being of this planet. Now 15.11, and how many species are there on the earth and how many in India. Okay, now let's check. Since there are published records for all the species discovered and named, we know how many species in all have been recorded so far, but it is not easy to answer the question of how many species there are on the earth. According to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources IUCN 2024, the total number of plants and animal species described so far is slightly more than the 1.5 millions, and but we have no clear idea of how many species are yet be discovered and described. Estimate the variety of widely, and many of them are only educated and guesses. For for many toxic taxonomic group and species inventories are more complete in temperature or temperate than in the tropical countries, considering than an ultimately overwhelmingly or large proportion of the species waiting to the discovered are the tropics. Biologists make a statistic comparison of the temperate tropical species richness of exhaustively studies group of insect and extrapolates this ratio of to the group of animals plans to come up in with a gross and estimate of the total number of species on the earth. So some extreme estimates and range from the 20 to 50 million, but a more conservative and scientifically sound estimate made by the Robert May place and the global species diversity at about 7 million. Okay. Now, let us look at the some interesting aspect about the Earth's biodiversity based on the currently available species inventories. More than 70% of all the species are recorded are animals, while plants including algae, fungi, and bryophyta, gymnosperm, and angiosperm comprises no more than 22% of the total. Among the animals, insects are the most and species richest taxonomic group, making up more than 70% of the total. That means out of every 10 animals of this planet and 7 are insects. Again how do we explain the enormous diversification of insect? The number of fungi species in the world is more than the combined total number of species of fishes, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. In figure 15.1, diversity is depicted showing species the number of taxa. Okay, this was the figure. You can note this as well as in your notes. Now, figure 15.1 representing the global biodiversity proportionate number of species of major taxa of plants, invertebrate and vertebrate. As we know that, it should be noted that these estimates do not give any figures for prokaryotic. Biologists are not sure about how many prokaryotic species are there might be. The problem is that conventional taxonomic methods are not suitable for the identifying microbial and species, and many species are simply not culturable under laboratory condition. If we accept biochemical or molecular criteria for declinating species for this group, then their diversity alone run into millions. Although India has only 2.4% of the world's land area, its share of the global species diversity is an impressive 8.1%. That is what makes our country one of the 12 mega diversity in countries in the world. Nearly 45,000 species of the plants and twice as many of animals have been recorded from India. And how many species are actually there waiting to be discovered and named? And if we accept May's global estimate, only 22% of the total species have been recorded so far. Applying this proportion of India diversity figure, as we estimate there are probably more than 1 lakh plants species and more than 3 lakh species yet to be discovered and described. Would we ever be able to complete an inventory of the biologist wealth of our country? Consider immense strength, manpower, taxonomists, and the time acquired to complete the job. The situation appears more hopeless, and when we realize that a large fraction of these species and faces the threat of becoming extinct even before we discovered them. Nature's biologist library is burning even before we catalog the title of all books stock here. Now 15.1.2 patterns of biodiversity. First is latitudinal gradient. What is latitudinal gradients? The diversity of plants and animals is not uniform throughout the world but shows a rather than uneven distribution for many groups of animals or plants. There are interesting patterns in diversity, the most well known being the latitudinal gradient in diversity. In general, species diversity decreases as we move away from the equator towards the poles. With a very few exceptions, tropics latitudinal range of 23.5 degrees north to 23.5 degrees south harbor more species than temperature or polar areas. Colombia, located near the equator, has the nearly 1,400 species of birds, while New York at the 41 degree has only 105 species, and Greenland at 71 degree only 56 species. And the India, with much of its land area in the tropical latitude and has more than 1,200 species of the birds, and the forest of in a tropical region like equator has up to 10 times as many species of vascular plants as forest of equal area in a temperature region like a Midwest of USA. The largely tropical Amazonian rainforest. Okay, it means Amazon rainforest. Okay, in South America has greatest biodiversity on the earth. It is home to more and then the 40,000 species of plants and 3,000 species and 1,300 of birds and 427 of mammals and 427 of amphibians and 378 reptiles and more than 125,000 invertebrates. Scientists estimate that in this rainforest there might be at the 2 million species waiting to be discovered and named. What is so special and about topic and that might account of greater biological diversity? Ecologists and evolutionary biologists have proposed the various hypotheses. Some important ones are: first is speciation and is generally a function of the time, unlike temperature regions subjected to frequent glaciation in the past. Tropical latitudes have remained relatively undisturbed for the millions of years and thus had a long evolutionary times for species diversification. Second, B. Tropical environments, unlike temperature ones, are less seasonal and relative more constant and predictable. Such constant environment promote Nike specialization and lead to a greater species and greater and C. There is more solar energy available in the topic, which contribute to higher productivity, and these turns might contribute and indirectly greater species. And our third is species area relationship. During his pioneering and expensive exploration in the wilderness of South American jungle, the great German naturalist and the geographer Alexander Humboldt observed that within a region species. Richness increased with increasing explorer area, but only to a limit. In fact, the relation between the species richness and area for a wide variety of taxa, angiosperm plant, birds, bats, freshwater fishes, and turns out to be a rectangular hyperbola figure 15.2. On a logarithmic scale, the relationship is a straight line described by the equation. Like this is the equation: log s log c plus log z log a, where s is species of richness and a is area and z is slope of line and c is y-intercept. Now ecologists have discovered that the value of z lies on the range to 0.1 to 0.2 regardless of taxonomic group or the region, whether it is the plant in Britain, birds in California, and the molluscs in New York State. The slope of regression lines are it's amazingly similar. But if you analyze the species area relationship among very large area like the entire continent, we will find that the slope of line and to be much steeper. Okay, z value in the range 0.1 to 0.6 to 0.1.2. okay, for example, frugivorous it means fruit eating birds. Okay, and mammals in the tropical forest of the different continent, the slope in is found to be 1.5. okay, and what to the steeper slopes and the means in the context is a very important line, so I should screenshot. This was very important, therefore I need this. Okay, now starts this 15.1.3, the importance of species diversity to the ecosystem. Does the number of species in a community really matter to the functioning of the ecosystem? This is a question for the which ecologists which have not been able to give a definitive answer. For many decades, ecologists believed that the community with more species and generally tend to be more stable than those with the less species. What exactly is stability for the biological? Okay, biological community. A stable community should not show too much variation in the productivity from year to year. It must be either resistant or resilient to occasional disturbance and natural or man-made, and it must also be resistant to invasion by alien species. We don't know how these attributes are linked to species richness in a community, but David Tillman's long-term ecosystem experiments using outdoor plots provide some tentative answer. Tillman found that plots with more species allowed less year-to-year variation in the total biomass, and he also showed that in his experiment increased biodiversity contributes to a higher productivity. And although we may not understand completely how species richness contributes to the well-being of an ecosystem, we know enough to realize that rich biodiversity is not only essential for the ecosystem health but imperative for the very survival for humans race on this planet. At the time we are losing species at alarming pace. One might ask, does it really matter to us if a few species become extinct? Would Western Ghats ecosystem be less functional if one of trees frog species is lost forever? How is our quality of life affected? say instead of 20,000 we have only 15,000 species of ants on the earth. In 20,000 only 50,000 species on the earth, that is ants. Do you know? Now there are no direct answer to such a native questions, but we can develop a proper perspective through an analogy, but that is revert proper hypothesis, so on, and used by the standard ecologist Paul Ehrlich. In a airplane ecosystem, all paths are joined together using thousands of river species, and if every passenger traveling in its popping of rivet to make home, causing species to become extinct, it may affect the flight safety, it means proper functioning, okay, of the ecosystem initially, but as more and more rivets are removed, the planet becomes dangerously weak over a period of time. Furthermore, which rivet removed may also be critical. Loss of rivet on the wings and the key species that derive major ecosystem function is obviously a more serious threat to fight plight and safety than loss of a few rivets on seats or window inside the plane. Now, loss of biodiversity. What is biodiversity or its losses? While it is doubtful if any new species are being added through speciation into the Earth's treasury of species, there is no doubt about the continuing losses. The biological wealth of our planet has been declining rapidly, and the accusing finger is clearly pointing to the human activity, and the colonization of tropical Pacific island by the humans is said to have led to extinction of more than 2,000 species of native birds. The IUCN Red List 2004 document the extinction of 7,084 species, including 338 vertebrate and 3,059 invertebrate and 87 plants. Okay, in last year, some of example of recent extinction include dodo, muritus, quagga, Africa, thylacine, Australia, Steller sea cow, Russia, and 3 species Bali, Javan, Caspian of tiger. The last 20 years alone have witnessed disappearance of 20 species, carefully analyzed and recorded. Therefore, we should wait for it. Yeah, this is very essential. Therefore, we should use. Now ये आप भी इसका स्क्रीनशॉट ले सकते हो, ये काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंट लाइन है नीट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से. ओके, चलो आगे पढ़ते हैं. Now here, the show's extinction across taxa are not random. Some group like amphibians appears to be vulnerable of extinction. Adding to the grim scenario of extinction is fact that more than 15,500 species worldwide are facing the threat of extinction. Presently, 12% of all birds, 23% of all mammal species, and 32% of all amphibians species, and 31% of all gymnosperm in the world faces threat extinction. This is also important for the need. Okay. From a study of history of life on the earth throughout its fossil records, learn and the large scale loss of species like the one we are current witnessing have also happened earlier, even before humans appeared on the scene during the long period less than 3 billion, and since the origin and the diversification of the life on the earth there were 5 episodes of mass extinction of species. How is the sixth extinction? The presently in the progress different from the previous episode, and this difference is in the rate, and the current species extinction rate are estimated to be 100 to 1000 times faster than in the pre-humans times, and our activity are responsible for the faster rate. And the ecological warm that if the present trend continued, nearly of all species on the earth might be wiped out within next 100 years. In general, loss of biodiversity in a region may lead to be a decline plant production, b lower resistant of environmental perturbation and such as drought, and c increase the variability in the certain ecosystem process such as plant productivity, water use, and pest and disease cycle. Causes of biodiversity: the accelerated rate of species extinction that would is facing now largely due to humans activity. There are four major causes. First, evil quarter is the sobriquet uses to subscribe them. Habitat loss and the fragmentation. What is fragmentation? This is the most important causing driving the animal and the plant extinction. The most dramatic example of habitat loss come from the tropical rainforest, once converging more than 14% of the Earth's land surface, and these rainforests now cover no more than 6%. They are being destroyed fast. By the time you finish reading this chapter, 1,000 more hectares of rainforest would have been lost, and the amazing rainforest, it is so used that it is called lungs of the planet. This is very important. Lungs of the planet किसे कहते हैं? The having probability millions of species is being cut and cleared for the cultivation soybeans or for the conservation to the grassland for raising beef cattle. Beside total loss, degradation of many habitats by the pollution also threaten the survival of many species when large habitats are broken up into a small fragment due to various human activities. Mammals and birds require large territories, and certain animals with migratory habitats are rapidly affected, leading to pollution decline. Over exploitation. Humans have also depend on the nature for the food, shelter, and when need turns to greed, it leads to over exploitation of natural resources. Many species extinction in the last 5 years. Steelers sea cow, passenger pigeon were due to over exploitation by humans. And presently many marine fishes and the population around the world over harvested, endangering the continued existence of some commercially important species. Now, alien species invasion. When alien species are introduced unintentional or deliberately for whatever purpose, some of them turns invasive and cause decline or extinction of the indigenous. Okay, indigenous and the Nile perch introduced into Lake Victoria in the East Africa led eventually to the extinction of an ecological unique ensemble of more than 200 species of the cichlid fishes in the lake. You must be familiar with the environmental damage caused and the threat posed to our native species by the invasive weed species like a carrot grass and the Parthenium, okay, the Latana and the water hyacinth Ecornia. The recent illegal introduction of the African catfish Clarias and the Gadipidus for aquaculture aquaculture, okay, and purpose is posing a threat to the endangered catfishes in our rivers. Coextinction. What is coextinction? When a species become extinct, the plant animals species associate with the obligatory way also may extinct. When a host fishes specimen become extinct, it's a unique assemblage of parasitic also meets the same fate. Another example in the case of co-evolved and plants pollinators mutualism, where extinction of one invariable leads to the extinction of the others. Okay, and now biodiversity conversation 15.2 and the 15.2.1. Why should we conserve the biodiversity? There are many reasons, some obvious, others do not obvious, but all equally important. They can be grouped into three categories: narrowly utilitarian and the broadly and the ethical. Okay, the narrowly utilitarian, what is this? Is a very important line. I think this is a very important. अब देखते हैं नैरो यूटिलिटेरियन क्या होता है. Okay, narrow utilitarian agreements for conserving biodiversity are obvious. Human derive countless direct economic benefit for the nature: food, cereals, pulses, fruit, firewood, fiber, construction material, industrial product, that tennis, lubricant, dyes and resin, perfume, and product of medicinal importance. More than 25% of the drugs currently sold in the market of worldwide are derived from the plants, and 25,000 species of the plant contribute to the traditional medicine used by the native people around the world. Nobody knows how many more medicinally useful plants are there in the tropical rainforest waiting to be explored, and with increasing the resource put into a bioprospecting, explore the molecular, genetic and the species level diversity of product of economic importance. Nation endowed with the rich biodiversity can be expect with to the reap enormous benefit. Broadly utilitarian agreement says that biodiversity plays a major role in our many ecosystem services that nature provides. The fast dwindling the fast dwindling Amazon forest is estimated produce through the photosynthetic 25% of the total oxygen of atmosphere. Can we put economic value on this service by nature? You can get some idea by the finding out how much your neighborhood hospital spend on cylinder oxygen. Okay, and the pollination, without which plant cannot give a fruit and or seeds, is another service ecosystem provide through pollinators layer, bees, bumbees and the birds and bats. What will be the cost of accomplishing pollinating without the help of natural pollinators? There are other intangible benefits that we derive from the nature and the aesthetic pleasure of walking through thick woods, watching spring flowers in the full bloom, or walking up to the bulbul's song in the morning. Can we put a price tag on such thing? Ethical argument meant for the conserving biodiversity relate to what away to millions of plants, animal, microbes, species with whom we share this planet. Physiological or the spiritually, we need to realize that every species has intrinsic value, even if we may not be current or any economic value to us, we have moral duty to care for their well-being and pass on our biological legacy in good order of to future generation. 15.2.2 How do we conserve biodiversity? When we conserve and protect the whole ecosystem, its biodiversity level is protected and we save the entire forest, save tiger. And the approach is called in situ, okay, or site conservation. However, when we situate where animal and endangered threatened organisms facing a very high risk extinction in the wild near future needs to be urgent to save from its extinction. X82 of conservation is desirable approach, okay. In situ conservation. Faced with the conflict between the development and the conservation, many nations and the find unrealistic and economical not feasible to conserve all their biological wealth. Invariable, the number of species waiting to be saved from the extinction far exceed the variation resources available on a global basis. These problems have been addressed and imminent conversation. Do you know convergentionists? They identify the maximum protection and certain biodiversity hotspots and regions with very high level of species richness and high degree of endemism, that it is species confined to the region and not to be found anywhere else. Initially 25 biodiversity hotspot identified, but subsequently 9 more have they been added a list, bringing the total number of biodiversity hotspot in the world 34. And the hotspot are also region of accelerate habitat loss. 3 of these hotspot, Western Ghat and Sri Lanka and Indo-Burma and Himalaya, cover our country's exceptionally high biodiversity region. Although all the biodiversity hotspots put together are covered less than 2% of Earth's land area and the number of species they are collectively. Harbour is extremely high and the strict protection of these hotspots could be reduced and ongoing mass extinction by the almost 30%. In India, ecological unique and the biodiversity rich are legally protected as biosphere reserve and national parks, arts and sanctuaries. India now has a 12 biosphere reserve, 90 national parks and 448 wildlife sanctuaries. India has also a history of religious and cultural traditional emphasized protection of nature. In many cultures, tracts of forest are wet or were set aside and all trees wildlife with were venerate and were the given total protection. Such sacred groups are found in Khasi and Jantia hills in Meghalaya, Arvali hills of Rajasthan, Western Ghat region of the Karnataka and the Maharashtra and the Sarguja, Chand and Bustard area of Madhya Pradesh. In Meghalaya, sacred groups are the last refused for a large number of rare and threatened plants. Ex situ conservation. In this approach, threatened people and plants are taken out from their natural habitat and placed in their special setting where they can protected and the given special care. Zoological botanical garden and the wildlife safari parks and the serves this purpose. There are many animals that have become extinct in the world but continue to maintain the zoological parks. In the recent year, ex situ conservation advanced beyond keep threatened species enclosed. Now, gametes of threatened species can be preserved in very viable and fertile for long periods using cryopreservation technique. Eggs can be fertilized in vitro and the plants can be propagated using tissue and culture method. Seeds of different genetic strain of commercially important and the plants can be kept for long period in seed banks. Biodiversity no political boundary and its conservation is therefore collectively responsible of all nations. The historic convention on biological diversity, the Earth Summit, held in the Rio de Janeiro in 1992, called upon all the nations to appropriate measures for the conservation of biodiversity and sustainable utilization of its benefit. It also a follow up and the World Summit on the sustainable development held in 2002. The Johannesburg and the South African in 190 centuries pledged their commitment and by the 2010 a significant reduction in the current rate of biodiversity losses at the global and the region and the local levels. Now let's check summaries. Okay, this summary. Since the life originated on Earth nearly 3.8 billion years ago, there has been enormous diversification on the life forms on diversity. Biodiversity refers to the sum total diversity extinct or exist at the level of biological organization. Of a particularly importance is the diversity of genetic species and ecosystem level and the conservation efforts are aimed at protecting diversity at all these levels. More than 1.5 million species have been recorded in the world, but there might still be nearly 6 million species on the earth waiting to be discovered and named. Okay, and named. Of the named species, less than 70% of are animals, or which 70% are insect, and the group of fungi has more species than the vertebrate species combined, and with the about 45,000 species of plant and the twice many species animals is one of 12 mega diversity contribute of the world. Species biodiversity on the earth is not uniformly distributed but shows interesting pattern. It is generally highest in the tropic, decreases towards poles. Important explanation for the species richness of tropics are tropics and had more evolutionary times. They provide a relatively constant environment and they receive more solar, which contributes to greater productivity. Species rich is also function of the area of a region. The species area relationship is a generally rectangular hyperbolic function. It is believed that community with high diversity and tend to be a less variable, more productive and the more resistant to the biological invasion. Earth's fossil history reveal incidents of mass extinction in the past, but the present rate of extinction largely attributed to the human activities are 100 to 1000 times after. Nearly 700 species have become extinct in the recent time and more than 15,500 species, of which less than 650 are from India, currently face threat of extinction. The cause of high extinction rate of present include habitat and the particularly forest loss and the fragmentation, over exploitation and the biological invention and the coextinction. The rich biodiversity is vital for the very survival of mankind. The reason for conserving biodiversity are narrow utilization and the utilization ethical. Besides the direct benefit, food, firewood, pharmaceutical, क्या लिखा हुआ है, pharmaceutical, okay, and there are many direct benefits are received through the ecosystem service such as pollination, the pest control, climate moderation, and the food control. We also have a moral responsibility to take the care of Earth and the biodiversity. Sorry. एक कंपनी का कॉल भी आना था क्या? Okay. Now, take good care of Earth's biodiversity and pass it on a good order to our next generation. Biodiversity conservation may be in Setu as well as in Setu. In Setu conservation, endangered species are protected in their natural habitat so that the entire protected. Recent 34 biodiversity hotspots in the world and have been proposed intensive conservation efforts. Of these, Western Ghats, Sri Lanka, Himalayas, Indo-Burma, and covered with the rich biodiversity region. Our country in situ efforts are reflected in its 14 biosphere reserve, 90 national park, less than wildlife sanctuary, and many sacred groups. Ex situ conservation methods include protective maintenance and threatened species, geological park, and the botanical gardens. In vitro fertilization, use tissues culture, propagation, and the cryopreservation of gametes. Okay guys, thanks for the watching till the video, and you're subscribed to our channel and to be a part of journey of our NEET. So see you in next video. Bye.